Yes, good morning, AP Euro students. This is a little out of order for me. I'm starting off right at the beginning of the school day because I wanted to make sure that everyone, all of my AP Euro classes that normally begin at this time, have the opportunity to see me and to hear what I have to say. Please do not just check in and leave, as I've got the sense that some of you are doing, because yes, I'm about to yell at you all, so please stay online. And the subject matter today is the quiz yesterday that was on Canvas. I looked at the results of that quiz, which was a very easy quiz. And I think right now, my math is not necessarily my strongest suit, but I think about 60% of my student body, my students, my AP Euro students, my advanced placement students, took the time to take a quiz that took 15 minutes and, was really not that difficult. That's extremely disappointing. Now, being the nice person that I am, and I am a nice person, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give everyone who took the quiz full credit. I'll give them 20 points. Those who didn't, I'll pretend as if you were sick, and I will not count the quiz against you. However, from now on, all bets are off. You guys need to check your email. You need to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You guys need to check your Canvas. Like I told you when we first started this, that I was going to use all the elements I could, email, the YouTube channel, Canvas, to try and make your learning experience as normal as possible in these very difficult times. So and I'll be working on another quiz in Canvas, which for me is not exactly an easy thing to do. I'm still getting used to this. Pardon me, don't worry. I'm still getting used to this, but I intend to figure it out. But at the same time, you have to do your part. I mean, I can't believe it. You don't have a job. You are not supposed to be hanging out with each other. I can't imagine that watching TV or staring at your phone, for just endless hours can be that interesting that you might not say, well, maybe I should do my schoolwork. And the cool thing about these YouTube videos is that they're always here. This one that I'm making today will last in perpetuity, which is a frightening thought. But yes, next time, and I'll come up with a quiz. I'll begin working on that, and this one will count more and will be more difficult, but there will be no forgiveness for this quiz. So yes. Anyway, so I think we should get started today and try to finish this chapter so I can give you the test on imperialism, alliances, and war. And like I said in my email yesterday, I think that it would be the height of folly for us to try to review for 5-6 weeks. You would just get tired of it. You would just get bored with it. And so would I, to be honest. And I don't think that would be, in the end, I don't think that would help us at all. And so after we finish this unit on imperialism, alliances, and war, we're going to go into the 20s and talk about the rise of the various types of extremist governments that occurred in Europe during the 20s and early 30s, leading up to World War II. And we'll see where we are when we go home for spring break. Go home for spring break, I know, right? And then, but I mean, and during spring break, I'm going to leave you alone because, this is, yeah, I know, and perhaps a little bit tiring. And then when we come back from spring break, which is April 13th, we're going to start reviewing every day. Now, you don't know, we're supposed to come back to school April 20th. If we do, that is so awesome, wonderful. If we don't, we'll keep reviewing until May the 6th when you take your exam. After that, we will go back and we will try to finish this unit on the 20th century because you still have classroom obligations. And, just because it's strange and just because there's a coronavirus and just because you don't have regular school, it does not mean vacation. Mr. Turner is quite correct on this. And you'll find, if you find yourself with a poor grade, for example, and I know you guys care a lot about your GPAs. If you find yourself with a poor grade, or goodness sakes, if you find yourself not passing this year in AP Euro, and every year somebody doesn't pass AP Euro, then I think that they will still have summer school, and so there it is. So let's begin. Now, we were talking about the Treaty of Versailles and its ramifications. Yes, we are on Roman numeral 27. Yes, we had just talked about the creation of this thing called the League of Nations, which will be a forerunner of the United Nations, which still exists to this day. The League of Nations, of course, had a lot less success. As far as the status of the United Nations today, it's still a functioning entity. I'm not sure it's functioning as strongly as Franklin Delano Roosevelt and its founders would have liked to have seen. Anyway, Roman numeral 27. The colonial empires, that means Great Britain, France in particular, also played a large role in the negotiation. These areas, meaning the areas of, for example, the old Ottoman Empire, which was now broken up, were broken up into things called mandates. Basically, it meant that much of the Middle East, which with the discovery of petroleum and the increased use of petroleum as a fuel, and the old German landholding colonies in Africa and in the Pacific, now were placed under the tutelage, the direction of France, Britain, and the idea was they would guide these former colonies towards independence. That was the supposition. However, there was very little advancement made in those countries in the Middle East, in the Pacific, towards advancement. Actually, the British and French basically tried to cash in on those colonies. Movements toward disarmament were also weak. Members of the League remained fully sovereign and continued to pursue their own selfish national interests. Wilson, in order to get the others to accept the League, also accepted those territorial settlements, meaning basically that for a while the British and French empires were really expanded. Just a side note here, for example, in World War I, a lot of the colonial countries, India, for example, Vietnam, for example, sent African countries, for example, sent soldiers to Europe. For the express hope, the express purpose that, when World War I was finished, that these countries, these colonies, would have proven themselves and therefore would be given a hearing as to whether or not they could be independent. And that never came about. That didn't come about at all. And it was most unfortunate. Vietnam, for example, Ho Chi Minh actually served in the French army in World War I on the Western Front. And so, these colonies, the British and French in particular, were not about to give up their colonial empires. All right, pushing on. And by the way, one other thing, I really appreciate your comments. In fact, keep doing that. It's one way to reassure me that you're tuning in and listening. So, if you're tuning in and listening, just send a comment. If you haven't noticed, I normally comment back. As mean as I am this morning, and I do still like you guys a lot. And yeah, so please send in your comments, and your comments can be constructive criticism. So let's get back to this. Roman numeral 28. In the West, of course, in Western Europe, the main territorial concern was the fate of Germany. Now, if you look at a map, and they cleaned my room yesterday, and stuff is all over the place. But here's the long and short of it. Germany was much bigger in 1917 than it is today. It lost territory in World War I, particularly in the east. It, of course, lost the Alsace-Lorraine, which was one of the primary features of the Treaty of Versailles. Alsace-Lorraine goes back to France. It lost the Baltic states, and Poland was created mainly out of German territory. German territory that, interestingly enough, was totally German. In other words, the people living there were German. And they basically pushed the eastern border of Germany got pushed to the west. In fact, when I visited Poland in 2016, a little town called Poznan, the biggest cultural attraction, historical attraction in Poznan was the summer home of Kaiser Wilhelm II. In other words, the emperor of the German Empire used to keep his summer residence in what is now Poland. And not only Poland, it's deep within Poland. So the point of the matter is that Germany lost a lot of territory. That was just one thing. And that was territory where Germans lived. And if you were German, you weren't really welcome there after World War I. By World War II, most Germans had moved. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. So, no one at the time, though, gave serious consideration of splitting Germany up again, as had existed before, before 1870, before the Franco-Prussian War. No one gave serious consideration of doing that again. However, as you're going to know, after World War II, that's exactly what they will do. Pardon me. The French wanted an independent Rhineland. Now, the Rhineland is a highly industrialized region in Western Germany. Basically, it runs along the eastern bank of the Rhine River. Highly industrialized. It's another part of that area that has lots of coal, iron, and limestone in the same proximity. The French, of course, got back the Alsace-Lorraine and the right to work the coal mines of the Saar, S-A-A-R, for 15 years. The Saar was another region in Germany, and the French in World War I, because they had performed so magnanimously, and the French were just lucky to be on the winning side. I mean, yes, a lot of brave Frenchmen died, lots and lots of them. And as their reward, they got to mine coal in the Saar, a German region, for 15 years. Yes, from 1918 to 1933. Germany, west of the Rhineland, and then an additional 50 miles to the east was to be a demilitarized zone. But Allied troops could stay on the west bank of the Rhine River for 15 years. Britain and the United States guaranteed to help France if Germany attacked again. Germany was disarmed, theoretically, at least, permanently. I mean, see, this is one of the things. Germany was supposed to be completely disarmed. And yeah, German army was reduced down to 100,000 men. I mean, the German army in World War II had 4 million men under arms. And so now that army was reduced to 100,000 men on long-term service. Its Navy, which the German Navy was, not the British Navy, but it was still, most of its ships were fairly new. The large dreadnought class battleships. The German Navy was scuttled. Scuttled means they actually took the ships and sank them. And the German Navy was reduced to basically a coast guard, a coastal defense force. Germany was forbidden to have warplanes, submarines, tanks, heavy artillery, or poison gas. Yeah, one of the interesting pieces of the settlement will be a condemnation of poison gas as a weapon. In fact, the Geneva Convention, which occurs after this, will forbid the use of poison gas as a weapon of war, which brings up an interesting point. Yes, the Geneva Convention of War forbids not only the use of poison gas, it forbids the use of biological weapons. However, it does not forbid the country, including the United States, from keeping such weapons. I mean, I've never heard of anything so, if you're going to make a law forbidding the use of a weapon, then why do you let countries keep the weapons, including the United States? You say, I don't believe you, Mr. Warden. The United States would keep biological and chemical weapons. Well, I'll tell you what, one day when you're able to drive, get in your car and go down I-75 south to Lexington and turn to the east on I-64, go to the town of Winchester, Kentucky. And in Winchester, there is an army base there, and they have a tremendously large storage dump where chemical weapons and biological weapons are stored in rusting canisters. And so, yeah. But we're forbidden from using those. Saddam Hussein was forbidden from using those, but he used them against the Kurds. And there is more than ample evidence that the current regime in Syria has used chemical weapons against its own people and suppressing that revolt there. All right, sorry to digress. Let's go back to this. Roman numeral 29. The settlement of Eastern Europe reflected the collapse of the great defeated empires. Yes, I mean, once again, the 4 empires, 4 dynasties were cast down, 4 empires were dismembered, the Russian Empire, the German Empire, the Austrian Empire, and of course the Ottoman Empire. The Hohenzollern dynasty of Germany, the Habsburg dynasty of Austria, the Habsburg dynasty of the Ottomans. I don't even know what those people were named. And finally, of course, the Habsburg, the Romanovs of Russia. So anyway, those countries had dominated Eastern Europe for centuries. I mean, the thing about that is, okay, great. Now you've gotten rid of all these autocracies, but now who's going to run things? I mean, stay with me now. Germany lost part of Silesia, and Silesia is where Poznan was. That's in Silesia, the city that I visited when I went to see Wes in 2016. And East Prussia. East Prussia lines the southern coast of the Baltic Sea all the way literally to Russia. East Prussia was cut off from the rest of Germany by the Polish corridor. Okay, Polish corridor. Polish corridor, a good term to know. What is the Polish corridor? It is on your matching question. And now you can find this in your textbook when you look at a post-World War I map, of Europe. The Polish corridor, the idea was that Poland, since to its northern border was still East Prussia, which is German territory, that Poland needed an outlet to the sea. And the outlet to the sea was to go through the German city of Danzig, D-A-N-Z-I-G, which today is called Gdansk. And so they gave Poland this corridor of territory, about 150-mile swath through, once again, German territory. And that was given to Poland. And, they created that. And you say, why is that so important, Mr. Horton? Well, when World War II rolls around, that'll be the thing Adolf Hitler starts yammering about, that he demanded to get that territory back. And that will be his pretext for invading Poland September 1st, 1939. Yeah, one of the excuses he used. Okay. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared. Austria-Hungary basically took up about half of what we now call Eastern Europe. And Austria-Hungary Austria was just a little tiny country that we know today as Austria, that, to be honest, looks to be about the size of Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio all put together. It's a tiny country. The Austrian Empire disappeared completely, giving way to 5 small successor states. Most of German-speaking Austria, though, remained in Austrian hands, but not all. Not all. The Magyars were left with Hungary. The Czechs and the Slovaks were joined together in Czechoslovakia, which included several million Germans living in the Sudetenland. Now, we talked about the Sudetenland before. The easternmost region in what is today the Czech Republic, which was populated primarily by millions of Germans. And so, yeah, the treaty makers of the Treaty of Versailles created this new country called Czechoslovakia. I don't know why they combined Czech Republic, what is now the Czechs and Slovaks. I guess they're all Slavs, so that'll be great. Well, it was not great, and as proven after 1991, when Czechoslovakia, after breaking off from the Soviet Union, broke apart in two. Southern Slavs were united. The Southern Slavs were united in the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Bosnian Muslims in what is called Yugoslavia. And yeah, Serbs, Croats, Bosnian Muslims. Serbs are Eastern Orthodox Christians, Croats are Roman Catholics, and of course Bosnian Muslims are Muslims. And they had not gotten along since the days of the old Ottoman Empire. I mean, early in the Ottoman Empire. And so, yeah, this was another. They, just said, oh, we'll just throw those groups together and they'll somehow make it work. Italy did gain Trentino and Trieste. Romania was enlarged by receiving Transylvania from Hungary. Because Hungary lost the war. When I was in Budapest, Hungary, touring that World War I museum, one of my pictures that I took, and was basically, it showed how much territory Hungary lost as a result of World War I. And it didn't just talk about, it broke it down into the population, it broke it down into the number of mines, it broke it down into the number of arable farmland, percentage-wise. It's quite interesting. So anyway, back to the matter at hand. Romania was, like I said, enlarged by receiving Transylvania from Hungary and Bessarabia from Russia, because both Hungary and Russia, Hungary had lost the war, Russia had dropped out of the war, and the writers of the Treaty of Versailles didn't make a whole lot of difference. They saw the Russians as traitors, as being undependable. Bulgaria lost its territory to Greece, Romania, and Yugoslavia. Russia, of course, lost Finland and what is called the Baltic states. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, as well as Russian territory was given over to this new country of Poland. Ta-da! Remember, Poland, which had disappeared in 1793, is now back on the map as of 1918. Territory that the Russians felt, and to be honest, still kind of feel, belongs to them. I mean, we'll talk about this later on, but in 2016, when I visited Poland, I went around, took train trips, went to Gdansk, went to Warsaw, went to Krakow, which basically is in the far reaches of Poland. And there were a lot of monuments, of course, to World War II, the things that the Nazis did. And, two things. Number one, the Poles towards the Germans were like, okay, yeah, we had a war. I hate this. No. That never happened at home. And Mr. Lynn, there you are. So yeah, I visited there, and there were lots of monuments to, what the Germans did in World War II. But particularly in Warsaw, I actually saw just as many monuments, not concerning what the Germans had done, but what the Russians had done to the Poles. And I actually found that, while the Polish attitude towards Germany was, okay, we had a war and there were atrocities committed, and, that's over and done with. In fact, every German chancellor since World War II, everyone, has visited Poland officially, including Angela Merkel, and has apologized to the people of Poland for the German invasion of Poland. But they hate the Russians. I mean, they just, hate the Russians. And it's quite interesting. Yeah. So, sorry. The Magyars were left with Hungary. I'm sorry, I skipped that. Russia lost Finland. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and Poland all became independent states. Okay, Roman numeral 30. The most debated part of the treaty was money. Reparations. How much money did Germany owe the Allies for Germany losing the war? One of the things I'm going to send you is an email that characterizes World War I as a bar fight, and it's actually funny, and it's also actually it's rather it's a pretty accurate description of of how World War I was conducted. But anyway, were reparations for the damage done by Germany during the war. How much money did Germany owe for getting beat to death? Before the armistice, the Germans promised to pay compensation for all damages done to the civilian populace of the Allies and their properties. The Americans judged that amount would be between 15 to 25 billion, and the Americans said, well, Germany should be able to pay that amount. Britain and France, worried about paying their war debts to the United States, yeah, the United States. You see, all the countries of Europe, World War I decimated them economically. The old myth that a war is great for the economy, it doesn't always hold true, especially when your country is being torn to bits by the war. I mean, you can kind of compare it to what's going on in the United States today. This war on the coronavirus is making us, we're shutting down industries. Industries aren't open, businesses aren't open, people aren't going to restaurants, the NBA is not playing, and all sorts of normal things are going on where people are getting salaries are being shut down. Well, the stock market, yes, is in free fall. And the same thing happened in World War I in Europe. But in the United States, business was booming. Why? Because the United States was not molested by the war. There was no damage done by the war. And there will be three, I always like to tell my students there are three winners of World War I. One of the winners of World War I were munitions dealers, people who made armaments. And most of those were in the United States of America. I mean, lots of people in the United States of America made fortunes in selling bombs, in selling, war materials, in selling things that could blow other people up. And so, yeah. A lot of the British and French owed the Americans lots of money for those armaments. Here's something that's interesting, and we'll look at this in the next chapter. The United States, being the proverbial good guy, actually, the United States forgives Germany its debts, but not the British and French, to which, of course, the British and French owed them a whole lot more money. And see, it was kind of ironic that money that the British, or rather the Germans owed the British and French was supposed to support their economies. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. Britain and France, worried about paying their war debts to the United States, were eager to have Germany pay the full cost of the war so they could turn around and pay the United States. Including the British and French thought that the Germans should also pay pensions to the survivors and the survivors' dependents of World War I. I mean, that's just going to be an incredible amount of money. So, there was a general agreement that Germany could not pay that amount. Germany had to pay $5 billion annually until 1921, at which time a final figure would be set, and Germany would then be given 30 years to pay that figure off. The French were happy about this. They said that either Germany would pay, and anyway, Germany was thinking France was thinking either Germany will pay and become a poor country, an impotent country, which would serve them well, or France would be forced to intervene. Ah, yes. Then there was Article 237, I think it is, or is it 231? Famous the guilt clause. It's called the War Guilt Clause article of the Treaty of Versailles, which the War Guilt Clause that Germany had to sign off on basically said that the whole war was their fault. The War Guilt Clause said, this war, everything about it, every person who died, every bomb that blew up, every bomb, and by the way, bombs, people in France and Belgium were still tripping over bombs, mines, long after the war. All of that, Germany's fault. Germany did the whole thing. And that included all the German citizens too. So they, meaning the Germans, also had to accept the whole treaty as written by the victors, and the Germans had no opportunity for negotiations. The only time the Germans were really invited to the treaty was when they came to sign it. So Germany's Prime Minister Philip Schneemann spoke of the treaty as the imprisonment of the German people and asked what hand would not wither that binds itself and us in these fetters. In other words, the people who wrote this document were corrupted. So the Social Democrats of Germany and the Catholic Center Party formed a new government, and their representatives signed the Versailles Treaty. This will become the Weimar Republic, WEIMAR. These parties formed the backbone of the Weimar Republic until 1933. This government never overcame the Treaty of Versailles. The Weimar Republic is going to rule Germany from 1918 to 1933 when Adolf Hitler takes over. And It never really could overcome the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Very difficult terms. Although, to be completely fair, the Weimar Republic had done actually pretty well during the 20s in just surviving. What will eventually do the Weimar Republic in, though, you like my Alabama shirt? What will eventually do the Weimar Republic in, though, will be the Great Depression. It's very easy, for people to pinpoint the cause of World War I, and they say, the cause of World War I, that's when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip. But what caused World War II? Well, the short answer would be World War I, but in actuality, World War II was caused by the Great Depression. You say, well, why? Because the Great Depression, it's the economy, stupid. The Great Depression, please don't tell Mom, it's trying to call me stupid. No, he didn't. The Great Depression opened the door for people, the very extremist, reactionary type governments, reactionary and radical type governments to come in and take over much of Europe, Germany and Italy, Spain. Anyway, so Roman numeral 31. The Treaty of Versailles has been criticized roundly by both the victors and the vanquished. In other words, the people who won, who were winners of the Treaty of Versailles, and the people who were losers of the Treaty of Versailles, they both criticized the treaty, and that's they both had reason to. The defeated nations, Germany, criticized it for obvious reasons. I mean, it was just too brutally harsh. To me, the worst thing about the Treaty of Versailles was that none of the people who signed that treaty, not the victors, not the British, not the French, nobody who signed that treaty ever asked themselves this question: what happens in 20 years when Germany, or whoever, or Germany in particular, Germany, the largest ethnic group in all of Europe, just stands up and says, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. Now, and why don't you just try and make me? And that would mean that the other countries, to force Germany to abide by that treaty, would have to go back to war. A war which, to be honest, they didn't want. But yeah. Okay. Back to the matter hand. Oh, we're getting close to the end. So the French said that the war, made them dependent for aid on an unreliable Anglo-Saxon country, meaning basically the British and the United States. England and the United States, as liberal nations, England and the United States, as the liberal nation, decried. That means they criticized the more severe parts of the treaty. Versailles was not a treaty without victors like they had advertised. There were victors, and there were people who were put in an advantageous position after the war. It also did not put an end to imperialism, but attempted to promote the national interests of the winning countries. Yeah, in fact, after World War I, Britain and France's empires were actually larger because of the mandate countries that were put under their tutelage. It violated ideas of self-determination by leaving significant pockets of minorities outside of their borders of their national homelands. Now, let's just say, what does that mean? Well, self-determination is supposed to mean that people of a certain ethnicity are ruled by people of their own ethnicity. But there were pockets of small ethnicities scattered throughout Eastern Europe in particular. Particularly, there was the Germans living in Czechoslovakia. There were lots of Germans living in the newly created Poland. And trust me, they were not kindly treated. They left before World War II, and their leaving was not like, oh, I just think I'll move somewhere else. They were pretty much forced to leave. And as well as the new small countries created in Eastern Europe, many of them were extremely racist, extremely harsh towards their minorities. Yeah, and so that's what it means. They created pockets of these minorities, ethnic minorities all over Europe that did face discrimination. And so, yeah, it didn't help self-determination fully. The most influential critic of the peace was this guy, Maynard Keynes. Maynard Keynes was the new voice of economics. He replaced Adam Smith. Adam Smith dealt with, the idea of laissez-faire economics, thinking of small businesses. Maynard Keynes dealt with, lived more in the 20th century, a century that saw these large mega companies, international companies. And so, yeah. So Maynard Keynes criticized the economic aspects of Versailles. He also attacked Woodrow Wilson as both a fool and a hypocrite, and Maynard Keynes called the Treaty of Versailles a Carthaginian peace. So what is a Carthaginian peace? A Carthaginian peace is a reference to, once again, the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage. About 500 BC, before the birth of Christ, the Roman civilization fought a series of wars, 3 wars against its rival Carthage, the Phoenicians. And after the 3rd war, Rome said, we're not gonna do this anymore, and so we're gonna put Carthage away once and for all. And what the Romans did, they not only destroyed the city of Carthage, they razed it. They knocked the wall, they tore down all the walls of the city of Carthage, and they made all the inhabitants of the city of Carthage slaves, took them back to Rome. But worst of all, they then went around the surrounding area of Rome, the surrounding area of the city of Carthage, the fields that had provided food for the people of Carthage, and they sowed it in salt. Yeah, I keep looking at the clock because I'm going to let you guys go in a minute. They sowed it in salt. In other words, the destruction of Carthage was so complete, Carthage would never come back. And that's what Maynard Keynes said this treaty was like. It was a total destruction of Germany into the idea that they would never come back. The book, Maynard Keynes' book, was widely read and believed and in the United States and Britain. It also gave credence to the anti-Versailles group in the United States who voted against ratification. America did not join the League of Nations. Britain was not obligated to protect France. And France, the most vulnerable, was left unprotected. Why was France most vulnerable? Because they shared a border with Germany. And so, yeah. But let's, getting back to that, let's talk about Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, Woodrow Wilson and what he did. It's kind of an interesting story, and it'll be the last story that I end with today. So Woodrow Wilson, yes, he goes to the Treaty of Versailles, and there's a big parade, and he's waving, and he has his 14 points that he's already told everybody about, and everybody has their hopes on this guy, this minister's son, this idealistic, demigod from the United States who's going to, bring peace and justice, a lasting peace throughout Europe with the Treaty of Versailles. And then they go set in on the Treaty of Versailles. And you know what happened. I mean, basically Woodrow Wilson got shot down by the British, but predominantly the French. They just weren't accepting any of the 14 points, except for the creation of the League of Nations. Well, Woodrow Wilson, once again, had so much faith in this League of Nations, this international Congress that in the future would solve all problems because, of course, all of the nations would come together and sit down at the table of reason and discuss things and would vote on things, and diplomacy would replace warfare. That he said, all right, sure. He signed the Treaty of Versailles, including Article 237, which gave Germany the blame for war. Germany has to give back the Alsace-Lorraine. Germany has to pay lots and lots of money. And Wilson signed off on that. Now, once again, though, you know, especially you guys in AP Gov, Mr. Arundel, you know that for a treaty in the United States to be a part of the United States agreed to it, that the president can sign the treaty, but he has to take it back to the Senate. And it needs a 2/3 majority vote of the Senate. Well, at the end of World War I, the government of the United States was so they were just not wanting to have anything to do with Europe, with foreign policy, with entangling alliances with a treaty, and surely not with the League of Nations. The Senate refused to sign it. And so Wilson, I mean, he was beside himself. He didn't know what to do. And what he does is he says, I know what, I'll take this to the people. And so Woodrow Wilson, and by this time Woodrow Wilson, he's just been to Europe. He's not especially, he's not a spring chicken, but he gets on the presidential train. Back before Air Force One, the airplane that the president now flies around in, the president traveled around in a bulletproof train car called the Ferdinand Magellan. And so Woodrow Wilson begins going across country and speaking to people, telling them the virtues of the Treaty of Versailles, how great it'll be to have a League of Nations. And, as he traveled across the country, newspaper reports kept coming in about his approval ratings, which were not good. And not only that, he would stand out in the rain, in the cold, talking about the Treaty of Versailles. And of course, I don't know if you've ever tried to sleep on a plane or a train. Sorry, if you ever tried to sleep on a train, it's just it's not the best thing in the world. And he was I believe in Denver, Colorado, and he had a stroke, a debilitating stroke. And so they canceled the tour, and they took Woodrow Wilson back to Washington as fast as the Ferdinand Magellan could take him. And he was then interred, put in bed in the White House. And here's the thing. Now this was something that had never happened before in the United States government. I mean, yes, we had presidents who had been assassinated or who had died in office, and then the vice president became the president. But what about a president who is physically incapable of carrying out the functions of his office? Because the president on a daily basis has to sign off on one thing after another. All of his appointments were canceled, but there were still papers to sign, decisions to be made, and this, that, and the other. Well, while this is going on, there were only two people to see the president, were allowed in to see the president. One was his physician, and the other was his wife, his second wife. He'd married again. And papers got signed, appointments got made, laws got passed. Most historians believe that during this time, during the rest of the Wilson administration until 2020, the acting president of the United States was not Woodrow Wilson, but Mrs. Wilson, because Woodrow, he never got out of bed again. And so, and that will be the end of that story. So the United States never signed the Treaty of Versailles. In fact, they signed a separate treaty with Germany in 1923. And they never joined the League of Nations, which was a handicapping factor because the League needed the leadership of the newest economic power in the world. But and that's where it ended. Now, tomorrow we're going to finish this chapter. And tonight I'm going to send you out your new study guide for the next unit. we're going to keep right on going. And I have been taught by Miss Wolf how to give you a test on Mastery Connect. I'm also going to be working on quizzes and things like that for you to do at home. But once again, listen to what I said. Subscribe to this channel. Pay attention to email. Pay attention to Canvas notifications. And for goodness sakes, keep watching these YouTubes. I'm sitting here looking, and right now there are 2 people listening to my lecture. You know, if you guys play with me, if you guys think this is a vacation, yeah, your GPAs will. It's school. I mean, do I have to really say that? And you're in an AP class. I promise tomorrow I won't be so angry. I'll just pretend it doesn't happen. But you can believe that if you don't do the work, which I don't think is very much, that, yeah, there will be consequences. And on that note, I promise not to be so mean tomorrow. And I hope to see you again. And I will be sending out an email tonight with the new study guides. And as of right now, yes, probably on Friday, I'll be putting this test in Mastery Connect. So yes, look for that on Friday. But keep listening, because who knows. Have a good day. Keep washing your hands. Do what the politicians or the leaders of this country tell us to. Goodbye.